We are back here with Larry Reed. Of course, we've talked a little bit about the mission of the Foundation for Economic Education, imparting these incredible ideas of liberty onto the youth of today, on tomorrow. And what is fascinating is I think back to this period in 2008, and I have my own recollection of what was happening in my life at that point in time. I owned some real estate, and of course, I saw the challenges that were created by that environment in Canada. The impact for us was a little bit different than watching the news happen in real time as we're getting it from our American counterparts. But at the time that you stepped in as president, you were right at the cusp of the news changing and the news around economic collapse, global calamity taking place around the financial system. And I'm curious, obviously you needed to go and seek donors, you needed to go and communicate with past donors to try to raise capital in a difficult time when people are fumbling around to figure out where the money is. What was that experience like now stepping into the role of president and trying to think through what does this economic challenge that the world is facing present for us at this organization?
We didn't know, of course, how deep or long lasting the correction would be, but it was obvious for some time that the economy was being artificially stimulated by a long stretch of artificially depressed interest rates, money creation, that the Congress had exacerbated the situation by various measures that funneled a lot of this new money into subprime mortgages. So we knew a correction was coming. And, I gave some thought to that when the offer came to take over fee at what looked like an unstable moment in the economy. But I thought, whatever the immediate future may hold, the need to make the case for liberty and free markets is only going to grow. That's not going to recede by economic developments. And in fact, maybe a sour economy would give us opportunities to do that that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And sure enough, and I remember in the first couple of years after I took over fee in 2008, that was the most popular request. I mean, I was doing a talk on explaining the Great Depression of the 1920s and 30s. I was doing that somewhere, it seemed, every 3 or 4 weeks because people were concerned about the environment and were we going to see a repeat of that and that sort of thing? What caused it and what are the similarities with the current situation? So, the situation was dire, but it also gave us opportunities. And to talk about the Great Depression means you get a chance to explain to people where booms and busts come from, that they don't come from the free marketplace. They come from government intervention. It gives you opportunities to talk about inflation and mismanagement of the money supply. All these are critically important topics within the broader liberty framework. And so I welcomed the opportunities that the bad times gave us to drive home some of the points we make all the time at fee.
And you mentioned the boom bust cycle, referred to as the business cycle. It's something that is quite core to the Austrian mindset around their take on what facilitates this rapid rise of price inflation and so forth, and then the precipitous decline that usually happens much faster than the rise. And so maybe just for our viewers who maybe aren't familiar, just extend on that a little bit from your perspective from the Austrian school. Why is it important for our listeners to understand why the boom bust cycle happens and how these interventions that take place facilitate the transaction?
It's so important for people to understand what brings these boom bust cycles into being because an awful lot of public policy is made based on these experiences, a lot of bad policy. Whenever we fall into tough economic times, that's when people kind of set aside some principles they thought they always believed. They are more eager to accept government intervention because the politicians say, we will save you, and so forth. And so, good policy is rarely made in moments of frantic excess, that instead you need sober minds and good ideas and probably more stable conditions to really expect good policy to flow. So people should understand that booms and busts are not natural to a free economy. They don't have their origin in people buying and selling and making investments and so forth. I mean, even in the healthiest of free economies, you're going to have some failures. But that's in the natural order of things because some people don't capitalize their enterprises sufficiently, and they misjudge the consumer, or any number of reasons why some people make mistakes, and they pay a price for it. But when you have a great number of industries and businesses across the board falling apart, seemingly out of nowhere, that requires an explanation. That's some sort of failure of the entrepreneurial function that cries out for explanation. And the Austrian School economists, I think, have done more good work in this area than any other. They have pointed out since the days of Ludwig von Mises, beginning in the 1920s, that a boom begins when government and its monetary authorities, for any number of reasons, stimulate the economy with easy money. They drive interest rates down by flooding the economy with easy money and credit. And at first, it feels good. It's like the guy who goes to a party and drinks like a fish. He feels pretty good for a while. But the next day, he's got to pay the price for that. And as Austrians have pointed out, the down phase or depression phase of the trade cycle is really a corrective period. It's when the excesses fostered by the false stimulation, the easy money, and the lower interest rates, the alcohol at the party, all of that comes back to bite us in the depression phase when we kind of cleanse those excesses from our system. Facing a depression,
You have to eject the poison somehow.
yeah, exactly. Facing a depression, I suppose there are two broad courses that the government could take. One would be for it to fess up and say, sorry, we did that to you. We caused the boom, and we therefore laid the foundation for the inevitable correction, the bust. We won't do that again. Of course, as an Austrian, that's the course I prefer. But the other course that government usually takes is it says, oh my gosh, don't blame us. It was everybody else who caused this, and we will be the saviors. We'll come in and save you. Here's another bottle. Have another drink. Let's reinflate, drive interest rates down again, and set us off to another boom. That's why we never get off this boom bust cycle, because government never really does the first option. It hasn't since the early 1920s. Instead, it just does more of what caused the problem in the first place. So people need to know that, so they don't say government is the solution to our problem. If they understand that it was the cause of the problem, they will look elsewhere, I think, for the right solution.
And I'm glad that you mentioned it that way, because elsewhere, well, one of those elsewheres is the Foundation for Economic Education, and it goes back to that mission. Of course, your zone and your target is for the youth of tomorrow, people in that age group you identified. But I really want to make sure people understand that it's certainly not limited to that. And there's so many incredible, free, amazing resources. I mean, you could basically get the equivalent of an economics degree just by reading the articles that are free on the website. I mean, it's really profound. And one of the things that I love that has happened, is that there's a lot of the original works of Leonard Read, who is one of the founders, available there. I believe all of his essays are available there for a free download there.
All of his books too, 27 books.
27 books. I believe that, the entire PDF is 1,200 pages or something. I mean, it's a lot of content, fantabulous material, even though it may have been written long ago. The problems that we're facing today, the ones that you've just identified, are still happening. There's still problems, and there's still problems that we're going to be dealing with tomorrow. In fact, we're in a current economic climate where massive, fundamentally printing of the money supply, increase to the monetary supply, certainly in the United States as well as in Canada and many other westernized nations, we're potentially going to see another problem. And I think we're seeing components of it now. I know we had an inverted yield curve scenario recently, so I would imagine you're watching those kind of things. And before we jump to our next break, I'm curious, what advice would you give someone who's watching this now, where they could really begin to understand to some depth what's happening at the government level and how they might play a better role at the personal level on moving forward so we can try to transition away from this boom bust system?
Well, because that's the central question that we deal with at Fee every day. We have created an awful lot of resources intended to provide the answers. So it may sound self-promotional, but I have to say the best answer to your question, Richard, is for people to frequently visit the Fee website. There's usually something new added to it every day. And if you explore the website, you'll find that there are not only 70 years of archived content, much of which is as relevant today as ever, but you also have courses that are offered. So if you're a teacher or a homeschool parent, you'll find incredibly valuable resources in that regard. Much of the commentary that we post on the main page of the website almost every day of the week, it deals with current issues. So you can examine what's happening around you through the lens of free market economics by visiting fee.org any day of the week. And also, we have Fee speakers appearing at events all over the country. And I'm happy to say that since COVID has receded, our in-person events for students are just going through the roof all over the world, not just in the United States. And our webinars continue to set records as well. So we're back in a growth phase under a new president, a man named Diogo Costa, who I think was a magnificent pick. He's from Brazil, and he's doing a wonderful job since he became president this past March.
Amazing. Fantastic. Well, with that in mind, we're going to talk a little bit more about Fee and how we can increase the ideas of liberty and the power of innovation that liberty provides when we come back after these messages.